MagicCon Legacy Cup.
Next on Eternal Durdles.
Stop, I need more stuff. Can't you see I need more stuff? But now we go.
Big shout out to all of our Patreon supporters. If you want to support the channel, you can go to patreon.com/eternaldurdles. In return, you'll get ad-free content and a bonus episode every single week. Thanks for watching. Hello and welcome to Eternal Durdles. I'm your host, Zach Clark, and with me as always, Phil Blackman. Phil, how's it going, man?
Zach, I was so close, my guy. I was
dude.
Close. We were close, man. We almost had a finish.
You were at 4, 1, and 2. So had you converted those 2 draws, you would have made top 8 of the Legacy Cup. So, and I think you were on a path to in the games that I saw. Like, had you had a turn or two more in each of those games, you would have converted those to wins. So the Miracles deck that you have built that's current, and I need to snapshot that and put it onto the Eternal Durdles. What's it called?
It's already changed, man. We're already evolving. Sorry,
we're already evolving. Oh no.
I'll do my best to recreate it, or if we can search the deck, I know what's in it. I can do that. But
fair enough.
Yeah. What had happened was I was one draw versus a win off, and the first draw that I had in the event was a game where I was deterministically. I would deterministically win if I had just one more turn. And my opponent was very much the one who took up most of the clock and was aware of that. They were playing they were slightly more of a casual player, didn't know what a lot of the cards did, but they were still playing all the powerful cards. Like they were playing a powerful deck. They just didn't know what a lot of the things did. I was testing out some interesting stuff. So like they were very
a lot of your cards were new too. Yeah.
They just soaked up a lot more of the game clock, and then they were deterministically dead because I could prove that I could fetch a Mystic Sanctuary for the removal while they were hellbent and get in for the last attack to kill them. And I displayed that, and I was like, would you concede? Because I think you took up more of the game clock. They were like, I would rather draw because I think I'm better to stay live if we draw rather than take a loss this early. So I was like, all right,
defensible, of course, but
it is reasonable. It's not like they did anything wrong. They also knew that they were aware that they took up more of the game clock, and that unfortunately later on came back to be the thing that bumped me out of being in the top 8 because I would have top 8'd at X11. But aside from that one glitch that threw it off, what the bigger deal isn't necessarily any particular thing that I did with my miracles list that got me there. What I want to say is it was an example of theory working, because a lot of the tools that I had played that I was testing out that we've talked about on the last couple of episodes that I was like, yep, I'm going to put our money where our mouth is and run this at the Legacy Cup, or this, these different options at the Legacy Cup, ended up doing well and working in the ways that I thought they were going to work. So nothing was a surprise, because the cards that were in the deck did the thing that they were in the deck to do, and they actually executed on that in a way where paid off right in round 1. I played against Blue-Black Reanimator, and I was playing Legacy's Allure in my deck, in my 75, which is I've been dabbling with cards like Strict Serenade, which is, the Swan Song variation that gives them a 2/2 after you counter their thing. And I was like, well, I want this type of card against Orcish Bowmasters and Teferi. So I want something that hits the subsection of cards that I otherwise have a problem with, but then I have to deal with this 2/2. And I was like, okay, well, I can play, at the time I'm playing Triumph of St. Catherine. So I'm like, their 2/2 is not going to line up against my 5/5 Baneslayer. So that's fine. But then once I moved a little further away from Triumph of St. Catherine, I was like, okay, I'm going to need a way to deal with the 2/2. So then I moved over to something like, what's the Vidalcan Shackles? So I was like, I'll just board in Vidalcan Shackles.
Whoa.
To take the 2/2 as a win condition. But also, because, post board, people board the removal out against me. Yeah. But also, if you have a Vidalcan Shackle sitting on the table, it's just a seal of Bowmaster. Bowmaster trigger on the stack, Vidalcan Shackles take it, and then resolve my cantrip that it was in response to. It's just a seal of Bowmaster. They can't play it anymore. So I was like, okay, well, that's an interesting proposition, because I found that I was getting into these, positions where, because Bowmaster has flash, you can't just cast your Ponder into it. Otherwise, it'll chunk you for too much of your life total. But then if they flash it in, then you still can't Ponder, because Ponder's a sorcery and they will chunk you for too much of your life total. So I was like, it just sort of blanks Ponder. And I was like, I need a way to solve that. I need to take the initiative back, because otherwise Ponder just never has the window. As long as we both have mana up, if they don't tap out for something else, I never have the window to resolve this sorcery speed spell. So when I was like, okay, well, I don't know about Vidalcan Shackles, because then I moved away from Strict Serenade. So then I tried Legacy's Allure, because I wanted my blue count to still be relatively high. Legacy's Allure is a blue for an enchantment that has, at the beginning of your upkeep, you can put a counter on it, and then At any time, you can sacrifice it to take control of a creature with power less than or equal to the number of counters that are on it. So you play Legacy's Allure, and then once you hit your upkeep, it's just Seal of Bowmaster for the rest of forever for 0 mana.
A card I used to play from Tempest because it was in a Tempest precon.
Eternal Durdles is proud to be sponsored by Moxfield.com. Moxfield is the best deck building website on the internet. You can find all of my and Phil's decks in links below, including decks from this episode. And if you do, you'll be directly supporting the channel.
So what happened in my round 1 against Blue-Black Reanimator was I played Legacy of Allure preemptively, post-board, and then it sat on the table for however long it sat on the table, and I was like, it's just going to sit here, and I know I never have to fear a Bowmaster ever again.
Yeah.
And they were like, well, I don't have any other options. They played the Bowmaster. I was like, yep, I'm going to take it with the Brainstorm that I had cast sitting on the stack.
Yeah.
And then I proceeded to bobble them the following turn and see that they were drawing their own Brainstorm. And I was like, wouldn't it be better? Wouldn't it be better if neither of us had to do this?
Yeah.
Wouldn't you also like if this wasn't part of the gameplay?
Just Bowmaster shame people into not playing Bowmaster.
Yeah, it's like usually you're on the other side, but doesn't this feel bad? Don't you hate this? Don't you not want this part of your experience? Do you want to continue playing this event anymore? Anyway, so that was the thing. And then there were the other cards that like showed up along the way. The 17 land, 4 bauble, 4 Lorien revealed tech was pretty powerful. I just didn't come prepared for certain decks that I didn't respect, Zach. My only legitimate loss was to Doomsday. You got to be prepared for Doomsday. If you're not,
did you play Brandon on Doomsday?
No, I played a guy named Oliver on Doomsday.
Okay.
Oliver was a really nice dude, and it was weird. So because they didn't consider the Legacy Cup comp REL. So there were a bunch of things that the judge staff just did to the event arbitrarily to keep it on time that wouldn't fly in a comp REL event. So I was 2-0, and I played against Doomsday. The Doomsday pilot was 1-1, but they didn't record their match. Like they didn't enter their match at the end of their previous round when the Doomsday player lost. So instead of a judge finding one of the players to find out what the result was, they just plugged in a result. So they gave the Doomsday player the win, even though they lost. Or I'm sorry, he was still at 1-1, but then they still paired it as though he had won after it was corrected. So I played against the Doomsday player when they were 1-1 and I was 2-0, which then I lost to the Doomsday player. So I was like, well, that's bad because that means that I got paired down in round 2, took a loss, and now my breakers are going to be worse because of that going on. So I was like, not, but at the same time, it's like if the trade-off is we don't have to wait an additional 10 or 15 minutes or whatever it is for them to like correct that in order for the tournament to continue, great. But like there was a couple of things. Like in round 1, I played against a Delver opponent, and they beat me in a fast game 1, and then proceeded to show me that they had 6 cards. They had 4 lightning bolts, a chain lightning, and a brazen borrower that weren't in their main board. They were like, oh shit, I had these in my sideboard. I didn't correct this. Yeah. So they presented a 54 card deck. And so when we presented it to the judge before we started game 2, we told the judge what happened. We were like, yep, my opponent just presented a 54 card deck. We did not know this until we went to sideboard after I'm down a game. And the judge was like, oh, that's interesting. Let me confer with the head judge about that. So he goes and confers with the head judge. He comes back and he's like, hey, so since this isn't a comp REL event, we're just going to say, be more careful and proceed.
That's wild. I don't know that is even correct, but like the fact that they went to a head judge and that was what it was. I don't know that at even F&M level that is not a game loss, but apparently not. I mean, I know that they've changed the rules for that stuff for over the course of the years.
The tech though against Blue Red Delver, the theory came through, man, and I was able to take game 2 and game 3. And then, nice. but like the biggest example of results oriented thinking, Zach, after that match, I came to you and I was like, yep, I told Zach the scenario of like what happened, of how I essentially lost game 1 because my opponent presented a legal deck. They were very nice though, and they were like very sorry about it. It was clear that it was not intentional. I did not read it as intentional, but like the judge staff also did not do anything to fix or correct the fact that there was an illegal game played. And then my opponent, who was unsure of what to do and also like very apologetic about what happened, also didn't know what to do. So we both just proceeded to play game 2 as though nothing went wrong in game 1. And so, but anyway, after the match, I tell Zach about it, and I was like, "Yeah, Zach. So my opponent presented an illegal deck in game 1," and Zach goes, "Okay, well, did you lose?" And I was like, "Well, no, I was able to pull out game 2 and 3." And he's like, "Okay, so what are you bitching about?" And I was like,
I don't know why you're complaining.
Result-oriented thinking from Zach here. Because if I had lost
like
2 or 3
at the end of the day,
you would have been like, wait, hold on. So, but so it was. I'll say that like hopefully going forward we can bump up the comp REL in the Legacy Cup. But I will say that the event was still like exactly the kind of Legacy that everybody wants to play. Like it was competitive, but also everybody that was there to have a good time. There was a lot of other things to do, so it wasn't like everybody's make or break on the weekend. Like it's like if you go to Eternal Weekend and you're only playing in one event, like, and then you might feel sour if you like bum out or like scrub out after putting in a ton of work or effort or whatever in your practice and playtesting. Whereas like people who didn't do well at this or didn't do as well as they wanted, like they have all of this other stuff to do at the con, so it's like so easy to shake off. So like nobody was in a downer mood at all throughout the entire event, which was good, and that's consistent from what we saw in the previous MagicCon. I assume it's what we'll see in the future MagicCons. Like it's just a fun event, and I'm hoping that there were 70 players.
Yeah, it was like 76. I think they said 69 players.
69 players. So I'm hoping that at the last Legacy Cup in Vegas, that sold out, and I think that's just because Vegas was easier draw for Legacy players to get to, apparently. But I'm hoping that when we go to Atlanta, the next MagicCon, or Vegas later this year, that when the Legacy Cup rolls around, or if they bring back Legacy for a painting, that we can boost those numbers back up. Because I remember Vegas capped out last time at 123 or 124 players. So it's certainly doable, and the more that happens, the more that they see it, and the more that they'll keep the more that they will take proactive action to make sure that Legacy is on
Legacy a thing that happens. Yeah,
and it's like, and then that's like also how we get to be content creators at that event. Like we get to go as content creators, but we're mostly tied to the Legacy Cup. So like if the Legacy Cup isn't there, it's kind of like, why would they invite us to go? And then we don't get to translate that experience. We can't give out tokens. We can't, chat and see people in person. And
everybody got a token. I made sure of it.
And one of the cool things was, like, we like talk to a bunch of people in Discord, online, people who listen to the cast, but we never like. So I want to say at least 5 or 6 people that I knew that like we know each other, but like had never met in person and got to meet in person.
You met Joe Dyer for the first time.
Yeah, and it's like that type of thing happens at the MagicCons, not always at like the one Legacy event every year, because not everybody's going to go to Eternal Weekend, either because they choose not to or because the schedules don't line up. So it's like being able to go to MagicCons where there's like all the other kind of stuff that people can do, and getting to meet people in person is really sweet. So
let me run through, because it won't take very long for me to run through my event, and then we'll talk more in depth about your event.
Yeah, you decided to run back playing.
Great. Teamer Delver. So I went with Teamer Delver, and I decided to throw. So we had been talking about power balance as like a fun of. I threw Glamdring in the deck. It was never relevant. I did get it out once, but my opponent had all the removal, so it just sat on the board, didn't do anything. And that was the case with power balance too. So like I'm not shocked either way. I did play the deck with 3 what's called Volcanic Islands, because I only own 3, and I just added another fetch, and that seemed like it was fine for the most part. So round 1, I played Breakfast. In the first game, I had my opponent like dead on board. I had like 3 or 4 threats, and I was like looking to swing for the kill. I had already removed like a Shuko. I had countered a Shuko and removed a core Nomad, and then my opponent untapped on like the turn before he was going to die. I was out of cards, and he just went Self-Illusionist, Core Nomad game, and then so he won that game like off of just the top decking the card that he was missing, and then in the next game I won, just played tempo, and then the next game he ended up doing like Nadu stuff and got me with Nadu, and it was at that point in the tournament that I was like, I should have just brought Breakfast. Like I just knew in my heart of hearts that like the deck that I wanted to play was Breakfast there. But anyhow, then the next round I go into Reanimate. I 2-1 to Reanimator. they did the sideboard juke, and I was just like, I'm just gonna keep all of my regular stuff in, and I think I brought in like one surgical extraction just as an in case kind of situation. But I was pretty sure just from watching my opponent's sideboard that they did not that they were gonna juke. So when I saw them hit the sideboard, and then I went back to my sideboard in game 3, and they just presented deck, and I was like, okay. So I was like, all right, fine. Like I'll just keep what I've got. Third round was Eldrazi, and I got Eldrazi. Ban Sowing Micah Spawn. For the love of God, that card is miserable to play against.
Do you think it survives the announcement in March?
I don't think it does. I think we're starting. I think people are starting to get their head in the game of like what they hate about the format right now, and I think that it's starting to coalesce. I think people are going to be talking about Sowing Micah Spawn as a card that should never have been printed. Not to mention, it should not be in Legacy. So hopefully that does change. To that end, Dave, my opponent, super nice guy, great dude. We had a great conversation after the round about like what we thought were the ills of the format and stuff. I felt like I wasn't trying to attack him, but he did seem sorry that Sowing Micah Spawn existed. But he was like, I'm not going to not play it, right? So round 4, I played against a Sultai control deck that like Abrupt Decays and what's called Kaido and Barrogoyf and all that stuff, and I just fair deck versus fair decked him at a 2-0. Round 5, my opponent did not show up, so I crushed that one. And it was at that point that I made sure to hand out tokens to everyone who was still sitting down. Played Reanimator in the next round. By the way, at this point, I am X and 2, 3 and 2. So then I played Reanimator next round, and my opponent did not juke, but I assumed they did because they went to their sideboard, and I just got Reanimator 2 times in a row. I think I won the middle game, the first game, and then they just like kept Reanimatoring me. And then I played Breakfast, basically just like had this weird if you look at the way my tournament went, it went Breakfast, Reanimator, Eldrazi, Sultai, No Show, Reanimator, Breakfast. It was like almost like it just mirrored itself like up and back. And I lost to Breakfast again. And that was, the whole time I was like, I should have just played Breakfast this weekend, but I had already registered my deck, days prior. So I was like, let me just run this out and see what would happen. To that end, ending up at X4 did not feel good. I don't know that I'll keep on Delvering right now. I think I just want to switch to Breakfast and try and like be the best Breakfast player I can be for the time being, at least until the ban announcement happens. And I don't know, if it's just Micah Spawn, then Nadu seems even better. But if they get rid of Entomb or something out of Reanimator, I think Breakfast is like where to be. I honestly do not think that people are going to be loud enough to get Nadu banned, and Nadu does not seem like a problem right now.
Yeah, I think it's one of those cards that's like looming as like it's so powerful. I played against Nadu once in my 7 rounds. Really proficient opponent who was playing. They said it was their first Legacy, like their competitive event, but they like had been playing Nadu for a while and enjoyed Nadu. And it was clear that like they knew what they were doing. And I can also appreciate that they were a player that did not ask to see a win condition from me when they were locked under multiple counterbalance. They were just like ready to go to the next one. And I was like, yeah, I can appreciate a player that knows that there's no relevant game actions anymore.
It's time to go. Yeah,
it's time to go. Like they were like, I value my life, you value yours. So
that's a smart. I gotta say this. Breakfast players. I don't know if he was on Breakfast or not. But no, Breakfast players, Nadu players. He
was on Breakfast. Yeah, he was Breakfast.
Yeah, we know that the clock is important, and once we're at a point where we can't win the game, it's like let's just go to the next one. This could take a minute to like do my combo or whatever. Like you're a combo control deck, so you can end the game quick, but you do need to end the game and get to the next one if you're not winning.
I appreciated that because pretty much every other opponent that I had, even when they were
It was
locked,
like, I'm playing it out.
Locked. Like
Yeah.
I when I did the I like flash my hand of like, you're never like, I have more cards in hand than you, and I have more counter spells than you have resources. Like, you are never resolving anything for the rest of the game. Would you like to go to the next game? They would like, no, I want to play it out. Or they'd go like, if they said, can I see your win condition? I would happily show them my win condition to get them to scoop. But like, please, if you're locked out, just scoop. But yeah, that was my only Nadu experience over the weekend was against that one player. And I was surprised because you had said that you'd played against Breakfast a couple of times, and Breakfast was popular in the tournament. Like, I saw it a bunch, but I was only paired up against it once. Fortunately, I dodged Ancient Tomb all day. I never played against Ancient Tomb.
I had a great conversation in the middle of the tournament too with Jacob and Brandon. Brandon was on Doomsday, where we were talking about the banned and restricted list, and like, because so they were from like the Chicago, like the local area, so getting like a different perspective, because like, we live in a bubble, for what it's worth. Like, we have our blue centric bubble that we live in. It was interesting to get like another perspective on what other people think, and it was slightly different than the way I thought about it. What was going to get banned and whatnot. So it was cool to like give you like, well, what's your local like what what's going on there. So that was a cool. I wanted to shout out the other people that I met at the tournament. So we got Nathan, we saw Pat, our old what's called our old editor. I saw Cantrip Cartel. That was awesome.
Yep. Getting to talk to the Cantrip Cartel was really sweet. For after
Bo, Josh, Tyler, Ian. Hey, Legacy fans! Since you're enjoying the show, please like and subscribe to the video. It helps the channel grow.
Support Eternal Turtles on Patreon so we can create even more content and cover events.
Patreons get an ad-free RSS feed, 4 bonus episodes a month, and Discord recognition. Join the Dirtle Maniacs at patreon.com/EternalDirtles.
Now back to the show.
They have subbed for me before on the podcast, so getting to thank them in person finally was pretty sweet.
Yeah. So I saw Bo, Josh, Tyler, Ian, Nick, another Nathan. I played 2 Nathans in the tournament, which I was like, that's our old co-host. And then Semanticore, who we missed playing in the playing pre-modern. I was trying to get a game in with him at the very end, but like, we just you were about to leave, so I was like, we gotta sit down and like have something to eat before you head out. And then Logan as well. So it was nice to meet everyone we could, and I honestly would have. I wish I could figure out a better way to communicate with people about the con, because I had the MC Chicago thing in our Discord, but not everyone was using it, which sucked.
Yeah,
it's like, join our Discord, be in this spot so we can talk to you.
Yeah, that was how we like got around and talked to people, was through the Discord. So like, if you watch this but aren't in the Discord for future events like that, where you're going to them, like, get in the Discord, because that's where we communicate with where we end up being. Like, that's how we found our where we were pre-modern battle boxing. Not everybody wants to do that, but like, if you are like, for whatever reason that you would want to hang out, that's where we
join the Discord, and if you're a Patreon person, you get like cool flair for the Discord as well. So there is that. So Phil, the things I want to talk about were, you had some wild pivot plans, at least in my eyes. One of them was Wastelands in your Miracles deck.
Yeah, so I'm not sure if I believe I've talked about this before, but I remember when I would play against Delver opponents, and they would ask how to board against me, I'd always caveat that I'm like, well, I'm the only, this kind of Miracles bro that you're ever going to play against. So like, grain of salt me. But like, if you're playing against a control opponent that is looking to go long, they're going to have to respect Wasteland anyway. They're going to do everything they can to play around Wasteland. The only times where they're not going to do that is if they're so pinned on their mana, like from a mulligan, and like that's all they have access to or whatever. But like, that's not what they're trying to do post board. They will try and play around your Wasteland. So the implicit value that you're already getting by them getting worse mana than they would otherwise like to get by having to fetch basics early to develop means that Wasteland is already generating value for you. So the Wasteland is changing their behavior. Its existence changes their behavior. So but if that's true, they're doing that to make Wasteland not a card. Now, if Wasteland is in your deck and not otherwise able to cast a spell for you, in this case, you're playing if I would play against Temur Delver, the only spell that it casts is Questing Druid. That's it.
Yeah.
No other spell in the deck is Wasteland contributing mana to, outside of like, okay, yes, it's another card in the graveyard for Murktide.
Yeah,
like,
I'll tap it for Murktide, I guess.
But if you can't get rid of it, or if you do get to convert, even though it won't change anything, it's another card for Murktide. But whatever.
Yeah.
That's like not what the purpose of the card is. So when people would say, "How do you board?" and they would show me their board, I'd be like, honestly, like I would board Wastelands out, board in all of your Pyroblasts in that spot, just be a dense, powerful 14 land deck that you know is not going to have your mana disrupted, and then you just get to be way more threat dense, and then you can fight over the stuff that would otherwise because the ways that a pile of shit white cards beats Delver opponents is you just have to convert the white spells. So battles always happen where a white spell will try and convert on a creature. We will fight over the white spell, and if I win that fight, I am ahead, and if you win that fight, I'm dead. And so if you have a Wasteland that could have been a Pyroblast for those fights, you're going to be in better position for when those fights inevitably happen. So I'd always tell people, I'd be like, board out your Wastelands. You just don't need them. You're already getting the implicit advantage from them. And it is never going to be the stock thing to do. So like, there will never be a time where it's like, oh yeah, sometimes you board out Dazes on the draw or whatever. Like that just isn't, it is not a known enough quantity as a strategy to board out Wastelands against control pilots that aren't 4-color. Like if you're playing against 4-color with Leyline Binding, like
sure, of course,
they can't play around Wasteland. But like if you're playing against a control deck that's like got a reasonable number of basics that they show you throughout the game, look, board them out. That way you can be super threat dense. So I was like, I was like, I should take my own advice here. So against decks that aren't going after my mana as the control shell, because I'm also looking to optimize to be low to the ground. I was playing 17 lands with 4 Lorien revealed at this event. So like against Nadu or Breakfast, they're not Wasteland decks, right? They're combo control decks, but they don't go after your mana. That is just not an axis that they're trying to disrupt you.
Agreed.
On. And so I would board out my Wasteland. I would board out my basics and bring in Wastelands. And because I can go Wasteland on one and Lorien Revealed ties the room together to function as a fetch land, it makes it so that the mana is still smooth enough, and you have like. In ways that it's not like Wastelands don't provide value outside of being a Wasteland for Delver. The mana is valuable for a control deck like me. I can cast a Predict. In the late game, maybe I do want the extra mana source to cast the Lorien Revealed. It can cycle the Lorien Revealed. Like I have plenty of action that I can do with a colorless mana source if I don't want to fire a Wasteland off immediately. But I was like, against the decks where I need to fight on that axis because my shit pile of white cards doesn't do anything otherwise. I was like, I need access to this. Back to Basics is too slow. Every time I've ever tried Blood Moon is too slow. Like all of the cards that otherwise would, interact with mana base is too slow. Sabo's Web doesn't stop all the things that I need to stop. Even though I've always liked Sabo's Web previously to stop like Rishadan Port and Caracas looping a legend against my white removal or whatever. Like I still have Sabo's Web in close reach. It's just not what I thought was going to be necessary against the Ancient Tomb Urza Saga decks. So I was like, I'm playing for Wasteland, and this is going to be my pivot plan, particularly against similarly against Painter. Like you can leave in your basics, but you can take out some number of your non-basics for Wastelands because you are always going to be fetching basics against Blood Moon, and if you put into play your spell, your Wasteland against their Blood Moon, it's still a red source for prismatic endings. But if they clip your Volk or your Tundra or whatever and cut you off blue, like that is a problem. But if you can snipe them off of their Ancient Tomb or their Urza Saga, they're a pretty low resource deck when it comes to being able to deploy. And so like being able to fight on that axis is also cool. So I was just taking my own medicine.
Yeah. I mean, I was completely surprised because you had altered Wastelands, and you happened to pick up they were by the season, and you picked up the winter one, and I was like, is that an altered Tundra?
Yeah. So
then you just Wasteland your opponent, and like my mind exploded.
To clarify what Zach is saying is there's a type of altar that's called a seasonal altar where each altar in a set is a different season. So like you have a summer altar, a winter altar, a spring altar, and a fall altar. And so I have a seasonal set of altered Wastelands that are Japanese that Zach had never seen before. And so when he saw it for the first time, he was like, wait, you're playing Wasteland? I had no idea you were on Wasteland. And I was like, yeah, it's part of the theory crafting behind like having a control deck, having to know what axis to fight on and how you line up against different games, different decks in the meta. And I was like, against anything Nadu, I'm boarding in Wastelands because they don't go after my mana. Or if I need additional tools where like there are some decks where I want all of my mana, but there are certain tools that are just blanks. So like, for example, when I play Counterbalance against Eldrazi, Counterbalance has 0 text. So I will just straight up board the Counterbalance out for the Wastelands. Do I need more lands? No, but I think of Wasteland as a spell against those decks more than anything else, because Counterbalance is not something that interacts in an axis they care about. They don't care about fighting on the stack because their stuff is always going to happen no matter what because they're cast triggers. But like they do care about their mana base being disrupted. So like, you pick and choose your battles on that front. But it's just like typically you'd have back to basics or something of that ilk. And I just don't think that any of the control for like the style of control that I like to play, it does work for Fenris God. Like he was playing
the blue, the Just Guy control deck like leans on that, of course.
Yeah. So like it's like you can still have decks that are like reliant on that. I prefer to play a heavy Mystic Sanctuary build, which means that like for me, it just doesn't work in the same way that I want because it is not enough of a haymaker against the decks that I want it against because Beseju exists. Eldrazi aggro also has Battlescape Mage that can get rid of enchantments. So like it's just not a lights out haymaker. It's like a powerful card. It's a powerful tool that like maybe you can convert a ton of time and find a different threat to close the game with. But like it's just not the lights out like I'm gonna scoop to this the way that like it otherwise used to be. And so I just don't think that it's good enough right now. And so I'm leaning more on the low to the ground strategy. But I do not bring it in against anything that like it's like, oh yeah, you could bring it against your Delver opponent. They would never play around it. They would have no idea. It's like, nope, that's not the access to beat that type of strategy. You're not beating tempo by going after their mana. They operate on 1 mana. You're not. That's not the space to beat them in. Like, but something like Nadu, they need to hit 3 mana and they need to hit 3 mana of particular colors. So like, if you snipe them or if you cut them in a particular position and then create a fight so that they can't hold up something like you can cut them off white in a certain spot where like to make them have to cast a spell at an awkward time. Like a bunch of their lands come into play tapped because they're playing multiple surveil lands. Like you can clip them before they ever actually get mana. You can clip an Urza Saga before it can make mana or get the tutor effect. So like there's a bunch of utility there in ways that you don't get it against somebody who's just playing 3 to 4 Volcanic Island.
Yeah, I think my big play of the weekend was not Stifle, but whatever, Consigned Memorying the trigger to make constructs off of an Urza Saga. Mm-hmm. I love that play, man. That's like my favorite play.
It's a fun play. The only downside is that it still means the Urza Saga converts 2 cards for free.
Yeah, sure. Well, it converts 1 card for free.
No, but you went down a card.
Sure. I guess. I'll gladly let my opponent resolve like their one drop is, as long as I know that like I can keep the Cephalid off the board. As long as I'm not losing to their beatdown later on in the game. But
yeah, I have also done the consigned to memory plan on their constructs, and I just find it to be relatively underwhelming because they then get to use the mana for other things because they know that they don't have the plan to hold up. You can't bait them into trying to hold up mana.
Yeah.
It's
not like a Stifle,
I can't do it now. And then they still will get to search. And I find typically that the more powerful thing to do, unless like if they're 8 cast and they're trying to beat down, cool. If they're breakfast, they don't care. The constructs are ancillary, man. They care about
it's just an extra thing, yeah.
So if anything, I'm like, you want like stifle the search trigger.
Yeah. Well, so you ended up at 4, 1, and 2. I ended up at 3 and 4. And it's funny because it seems close, but your tournament experience was so much more successful than mine. And I think you did a good job at this tournament of proving that like this deck is viable and that like maybe control isn't necessarily dead if you're willing to constantly innovate.
Yeah, I think one thing that we talked about, and because I ran into the situation where I would have had of my 2 draws, one of them was a legitimate draw. One of them was I was deterministically going to win if I had just an additional turn. And then we were talking about afterwards how you were like, I think that's like one of the implicit flaws that like you have to accept. That's part of a control strategy that like wants to endure and not die, is that like the clock is a problem. And in paper, you can play as fast as you want, but if your opponent is just not going to do that, then you have to take the action by playing additional threats. Otherwise, which is functionally like diluting the power of your deck in order to counteract like the people who otherwise play slow. And like, agreed. I think that like that's the approach that like has to happen for players that don't play slow. But all the players that I did play against, where that like the players that were playing slow also had an awareness after the fact that they were the players who were slow. And I just urge anyone who has that kind of awareness, like if you know that you consume more of the clock, don't be the guy. Don't do it. Don't do it.
Now, my advice to you after this was, and I think we'll close on this, was Phil, I can tell you the last time I went to time in a Magic tournament, and it was over 3 years ago, because I don't play these decks. The last time I went to time, it was probably back when they still had Grand Prix, because I tried to play a control deck at a Grand Prix and was like, when you're playing with a massive amount of people are just like going to show up and like, varying levels of familiarity with cards and whatnot. And if you lose 1 or 2 rounds, especially if you draw one, geez, then you're in the draw bracket. That's a whole other thing. But and once you get in the draw bracket, especially with a control deck, you might as well just like leave the tournament, because
was actually so something I like we didn't get to talk about while we were in Chicago together is I dodged Ancient Tomb because I took that inadvertent draw early. Now, that was a match that I would have won had I had an additional turn, but because my opponent was like, no, we're going to draw, and then we went into the draw bracket, I then didn't run into Ancient Tomb all day. And
now, you don't know what would have happened if you would have won. You might have gotten paired up against Ancient Tomb for the rest of the tournament, you know?
But what I'm saying is, like, maybe the way to play control in this format is just draw as early as possible, and then just never run into Ancient Tomb.
I can tell you from experience, it's a terrible idea. The drawing when you're playing control deck, it puts you in a position where you are
only going
to be playing against
all day, Zach. You're just going to play fun Magic for the rest of the day.
No, you're going to be playing against people who have already proven that they're slower players, right? So that's the problem. Yeah. So for me, my thing is, I don't play those decks. Like, even I joke about Cephalid Breakfast being a control deck, because you do kind of have to play it like a control deck, but you can slam the I win button when you need to and end the game. And you don't have to wait like, oh man, like they called time in the round and now I have, 3 turns to play a creature, protect it, and like end the game. And if your opponent's at like 15 life, depending on what your threat is, you might mathematically just be not able to win the game if that happens. Then you're just playing to stay alive, and that's not really where you want to be. So for me, I play decks that are tempo or that are aggro control, or that are combo control, because I absolutely, like, my least favorite thing in the world is to draw when I know that like just a few more turns would have gotten me there. So I talked you off a ledge a little bit about that, but like I also know that like you're not gonna like be like, oh yeah, I'll just stop playing Miracles. So just something that I think anyone listening should keep in mind is like, if you don't like drawing, part of that is on the people that you play against, but a large part of that is also on the deck that you're choosing to play. If you have to wait till turn 8+ to end the game, there's a good chance that you might not get to end the game in a situation where time is on the line. So it's just something to think about, and it's something that I think about before I decide to sleeve up a 75 every single time. And it's like I said, it's why I haven't gone to time in, like, I don't know, I guess since before the pandemic at this point.
Well, there you have it.
So, something to think about it. So anyhow, thank you all for watching, and we will catch you on the flip.
Before you go, I need some help. Please subscribe to this channel and do your part to help sustain the Legacy content ecosystem. Just subscribe to this channel goes a long way to reminding YouTube that people love and support this format. Now, if you really want to go the extra mile, you should think about supporting us through Patreon. Both the links for subscription and Patreon are right here. And if you're listening on an audio format, you can go to patreon.com/eternaldurdles. Thanks so much for watching.